Well, thanks for staying with us, Central Georgia. Right now, we are taking a walk around the quad with your latest update of your forecast as of 11 a.m. here on this Sunday morning. Taking a look around Central Georgia, where you can see that one of the images is a little bit different than the other, and that is going to be downtown Macon, where your visibility is really limited. In fact, we have a lot of these mist showers that are going on, and these mist showers are a little bit of the frozen variety, but for the most part, your visibility is looking good to go, and we have received very minimal winter weather impacts here as of this morning. We've had a couple of areas that are continuing to even see something of the frozen nature, but first things first, take a look at your visibility map, where we do see plenty of low-level cloud cover and some of those mist showers creating visibilities of even below a mile ahead of you, like what we see in downtown Macon over to the west, patchy areas of that over to the east. But overall, it's not too dense in the form of anything in the way of that surface fog. And we are continuing to hold on to some sub-freezing temperatures, but now really starting to see some areas climb back above that 32-degree number. So 32 is present over in Wrightsville, Swainsboro, all the way up to Gordon, Milledgeville, and Sparta. 30 degrees in Sandersville, 31 in Eatonton and Monticello, another 32 over in Forsyth. Farther down to the south and the southwest, that's where you're going to spot your warmer temperatures, seeing some upper 30s, some low 40s, and we do see that green shade over there to the west of us. Right now, almost everyone in the entire country is experiencing some frigid air. Single digits up in the Midwest and the Central Plains, getting over into the Great Lakes region, 8 degrees in St. Louis, 11 degrees in Indianapolis, 25 in Lexington, 31 in Nashville, and we do see our fair share of scattered 30s and even a 40 over in New Orleans. But there are a couple values that are not quite like the rest of Central Georgia, or not like the rest of the country, rather, I should say. 62 in Montgomery, 69 in Panama City, 56 in Jacksonville, and a 79 down in Orlando. Central and southern Alabama, southwestern Georgia, and the state of Florida are holding on to basically the only warm air mass that we do see across anywhere in the entire country. So we are looking at a frontal boundary that is now beginning to move in from west to east, right now currently present over in central Alabama, which you will see on your satellite and radar imagery in just a moment. Winds and wind gusts, they have gotten a bit of a tick down. We are looking at anywhere from about maybe a 6 to about a 10 mile per hour sustained breeze. None of those gusts that are up there around, say, 20 to maybe even 25 miles per hour in nature. Feels like temperatures, when you pair up a little bit of a breeze, most of your feels like numbers are still well down into the 20s, a couple areas closer to 30, and still a couple of 40s down there to the south and the southwest. But now let's get into your satellite and radar picture, which is quite messy, and obviously right now you can't see much in the way of anything of the frozen nature, except a couple of those pink shades that are present in a select few isolated spots. It's not really widespread, anything that we are seeing of the frozen nature in terms of your precipitation still. But I do want to go ahead and preface that there are your fair share of mist showers out there that are so light in nature that, number one, the satellite and radar imagery is not picking up on it. And number two, they are so light in nature, they are not posing any impacts in the way of something sticking down to the surface and creating some slick conditions. So maybe a patch of that over there around Forsyth along I-75, seeing a couple splotches of pink over to the west of 475, just outside of Bibb County and southern Monroe County over into areas of northeastern Crawford County. Some here on the northern end of Washington County, moving over into Glasscock County and Warren County, and many of those scattered frozen precipitation, maybe sprinkles, are going to be along the I-20 corridor in the portion of south North Georgia is what I'm trying to say, just to the north of us here in central Georgia. Then we go down to the south. Can't rule out maybe a splotch or two and maybe some pink down there in Lawrence County and some of our southernmost counties, but all in all, you're not noticing anything of the frozen nature in line of maybe possibly a bit of a sprinkle or a bit of a drizzle. Now let's go up to northeastern Georgia, where we continue to see a good mix of that rain, maybe even some sleet, a freezing rain, maybe even potentially some brief snow showers. And right there along the I-85 corridor, where still the risk of seeing some ice accumulations remains the greatest in the state of Georgia. But then we take a look over to the west, where, yes, this is a definitive line of just straight rain. This is green, starting to see some patchy areas of yellow, some oranges. that is going to indicate just rain showers. So this is a warmer air mass out ahead of this line of rain that continues to push in from west to east, starting to move into the northwestern corner of the state. And then, of course, as you go farther to the north, still holding on to a bit of a colder air mass back up into eastern Tennessee, maybe even some portions of northwest Georgia, but back over into northeastern Alabama around Gadsden, getting over to Oxford. That's where we're talking about a warmer air mass that is surging up from south to north. So this line of rain is very profound, and as you continue to go farther and farther down to the south of this line, you're going to notice some darker shades, some shades of some red, even a couple of flashes of lightning right here down here in southwestern Alabama, kind of to the west of I-65. And then on the backside of this is going to be more so something of the frozen nature. So there's a much colder air mass on the backside of this line of rain. But as it continues to move to the east, like we were talking about, there's a warm air mass in central Alabama right now, and that's what it is encountering. And as the front pushes towards central Georgia, that's what is going to happen. We're going to push that warmer air mass into mainly areas of west and southwest central Georgia. Right now we are substantially cooler because of the wedge right now that continues to be very profound coming in from the north and the northeast. That's why we see all this precipitation of the frozen nature up to the north of us here in central Georgia, but it is of the liquid form and even in the form of some thunderstorms over to the west and southwest of us. But once again, all of what we're seeing here across the eastern half of the United States, weather-wise, continues to be attributed to this large winter storm. So areas as far back over to the west as maybe western Texas, getting down into southern New Mexico, seeing a band of some snow showers still existing from eastern Oklahoma through northwestern Arkansas, southern Missouri, and up into central Illinois. But the bulk of the snow showers are now present really in the Ohio Valley region, the Great Lakes portion, the eastern Great Lakes, getting closer over to Lake Erie and Lake Ontario. And then we get over into Pennsylvania, New York, all the way up into New England, where they are now starting to see some pretty steady snow showers, even some heavy snow showers in portions of Pennsylvania and getting up into New York. But you do see that snow transitioning into more of a wintry mix where the air temperatures are a little bit closer to that 32-degree number, and a good patch of seeing where we can see maybe something in the form of just steady, maybe even some heavy showers. And of course, where the most warm and the most humid air mass is down there in central Alabama, south central Alabama, that is going to be where your thunderstorms are. So this wedge setup, those Appalachian Mountains really acting like a dividing line right now. That's where you are going to see areas to the west of them a little bit warmer and holding on to some rain showers back over into eastern Tennessee. But over to the east of the Appalachian Mountains, it's going to be precipitation of the frozen nature. So that is super indicative of that wedge setup. That colder and drier air cannot move across the Appalachian Mountains. So that's why we are seeing a warmer air mass over on the west side of those mountains. But on the east side, that colder air mass continues to push down into areas of the deep southeast. So we are still holding on to our winter weather advisory. Overall, we haven't had as much confidence in drastic impacts with this winter weather as areas to the north of us that have been highlighted in that ice storm warning. And we have seen some areas taken out of it up in the northwestern corner of the state. I imagine some areas will get taken off of it as we go throughout the rest of today as well in north and northeastern central or northeastern Georgia. And then our areas down here in the winter weather advisory, our northernmost counties, we'll very likely see that come to a conclusion here over the next couple of hours. But we had the possibility of ice accumulation up to about 1/4 of an inch at the very most. We have seen minimal impacts. In fact, all of our EMA directors, even in Jasper, Putnam, and Hancock counties, our northernmost counties right on the edge of that ice storm warning, have not been reporting anything in the way of hazardous road conditions, anything in the way of really some impactful icing. They have reported maybe some light coatings of ice in a select few spots, specifically Pike County. I know the EMA director did report something in the way of maybe some light icing on some tree branches and some twigs, but nothing like what they are seeing up in north and northeastern central or Georgia, excuse me. I'm so used to saying central Georgia as of right now. But Atlanta, getting up into the Gainesville area, I-85 corridor, north of I-85, getting into the North Georgia mountains. They are seeing their fair share of impacts from accumulated sleet, accumulated freezing rain, and they have their fair share of icy conditions. In fact, all in total, maybe close to around 2,000 power outages that have been reported up there in the north and the northeastern portion of the state. And we continue to see winter weather alerts spanning as far west as southern New Mexico, all the way up into the very tip top of the state of Maine. This is a stretch of over about 2,000 miles of winter weather alerts all across the United States. All the more reason why we are continuing to cover this, along with many other stations that are within our company. This has impacted many markets. Some areas have just been dealing with typical snow, which they're used to this time of year. It is January after all, but this has had some pretty drastic ice implications for many areas of the country. But what we have been talking about of most of this morning, this is mainly just phase one of the impact. So we weren't forecasting anything in the way of winter weather impacts down to the south of Macon, really. We were saying that you could see some slick spots, maybe in Warner Robins, maybe even as far south as Dublin. But overall, the chance of that was going to be very low. If anyone saw any ice accumulation, it was going to be north of Macon. Well, we haven't seen any of those impacts, and that's not a bad thing. Areas up in North Georgia are going to be dealing with those impacts for a good amount of time as you head into the beginning of this week, and some of those power outages could even be long lasting, especially given the fact that they are looking at more ice to accumulate given the rain chances that we have later on this afternoon. So that's where phase two comes into play. But down here in central Georgia, we have a risk that North Georgia does not have this go round. Sunday afternoon, so in a couple of hours, we are looking at that line of showers and some storms that is present back over into Alabama. That is going to move through as we go throughout the afternoon and into the evening hours. Then phase three is going to be the potential refreezing of any wet surfaces that remain in the forecast as we go into Monday morning. So let's break down what you need to know. So the day one storm outlook still shows the same storm outlook as we did have as of yesterday afternoon. Most of central Georgia remains in a level 1 out of 5 risk for some potential strong to severe weather, but a level 2 down here in the yellow shade is going to be present just to the southwest of us. Areas like Ellaville and getting over into Americus and Sumter and Schley counties, and even southwestern Crisp County is clipped in that level 2 risk. What you need to know is that areas down to the south and the southwest here in central Georgia. So I'm looking at Macon, maybe even Taylor County, Dooley County, Wilcox County. The farther south and southwest that you live throughout today, you have a greater chance of seeing some more active weather and some stronger weather in nature. Yes, we have the potential for a brief spin-up tornado, but that is not atypical for a level 1 or a level 2 risk. That is something that typically gets highlighted a lot of the time, so we don't want you really putting any stress over that. This is just a potential risk that we want you to remain focused on as we go throughout this afternoon. If anything is to pop up in the way of a tornado warning, we will of course be cutting into the air and keeping you informed about what's going on. But right now, we'll talk about what we are seeing as of recent trends as opposed to yesterday afternoon and this afternoon. And we're going to start it out with future view temperatures to get a rough idea of the timing and that temperature profile all across central Georgia. So over the next hour, we are expecting a pretty drastic increase in those numbers. Upper 40s, even some areas already in the 50s farther down to the south and the southwest. That's going to be a big reason for the potential for maybe some of that severe weather to begin to start to pop up. Areas down to the south and the southwest going to be a much more humid environment and a much warmer environment than areas up to the north and the northeast, which are still holding on to that wedge setup with some numbers that are just above freezing temperature in the mid 30s. Then we go into around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So that's when I am forecasting this line of showers and some storms to move into our west and northwestern most counties, and it will continue to be fairly widespread sometime around the 3 p.m. hour, moving through the Macon area, moving through Warner Robins, and then making its way to the I-16 corridor closer to around 4 p.m. It's just this leading edge that is going to have the severe weather implications. Once that leading edge does pass you by, maybe takes about 10 to 15, maybe 20 minutes at the most, you will have some backside rain, but that rain is going to be a lot lighter in nature than what you see in these red and these orange colors, and that's not going to have any severe weather potential. This is just going to be simply some residual showers that continue to add on to some of the totals that we will see ahead of this main initial line. And then we could see this line push out as early as around the 5 to 6 p.m. hours. My rough timing for a window for these storms is going to be 2 to 7 p.m. later on this afternoon into the evening hours, allowing for a little bit of wiggle room if the models want to fluctuate in terms of your timing with this potential severe weather risk. But the theme is going to be much warmer down to the south and the southwest as opposed to the north and the northeast, which you will see when I show you the feels like temperatures in just a moment. Going into this evening, still 8 p.m., our fair share of widely scattered showers. Then we do see those rain chances taper off from west to east, 11 p.m. already nice and clear in areas like Forsyth, Thomaston, up here in Macon, still holding on to a couple of showers in Eastman, Dublin, down in Vidalia. But all that rain is out of here as we go into the overnight hours. And then as we start to approach early tomorrow morning, we finally see that cloud cover clearing. And then a much colder air mass is going to move in behind that frontal boundary, hence what you saw the temperature difference in areas of Mississippi and the temperatures in areas ahead of the frontal boundary into Alabama, where we saw some 60s in Alabama, but back in Mississippi, they were already seeing some 30s. A much colder air mass will move in. In fact, it will be the coldest air mass that we have seen so far during the winter season. Here's a look at your actual numbers as we walk out the door tomorrow morning. Mid-20s at the lowest, maybe some upper 20s, but the common theme with this is almost everyone in central Georgia will dip below that freezing temperature. Maybe our far southeastern counties don't necessarily dip below freezing, which will be a good thing. Remember, this frontal boundary is going to have some storms. Storms have heavier rainfall rates, so there are likely going to be more accumulation of rainfall in areas that do see the passing of this frontal boundary, which, newsflash, is going to be all of central Georgia. So if you do have the potential for those numbers dipping back below freezing, and especially 28 degrees, if they get below that 28 degree number, that's when you start to get into hard freeze category. So areas farther up to the north and the northwest, they have the potential for seeing some surfaces that are still wet going into the nighttime hours, which we're not going to get a lot of evaporation of until tomorrow afternoon. That's when you could see the refreezing over of some of those surfaces. So the main note with that, that's going to be phase 3, the refreezing over of those surfaces. Make sure that you're driving with some caution on that way to school and work as you head out the door on Monday morning. Then you go into Monday afternoon. We will pop above freezing temperature for your actual numbers, somewhere high temperatures in the mid to the upper 30s, maybe the low 40s, but we are going to have plenty of sunshine. So that's going to really help at melting anything that does try to freeze over. And then we go into Tuesday morning, your temperatures are going to get even lower, upper teens for some morning lows as we walk out the door on Tuesday morning. More on that in just a moment as well. So now taking a look at the tornado potential graphic, which I will have to edit just a tad bit because it wasn't dragged in on the right time frame right there. So it was going into Monday, and what we want to know is what's the tornado potential looking like for Sunday. So this is what you will see over there into eastern Alabama, maybe southwestern Georgia. There are going to be some flashes of some light areas of some green, maybe even some yellow colors, which on this scale you will see starts to get kind of in the medium range, a more conducive environment for potential tornadic development. Well, once it moves through central Georgia, it is really just our south and southwesternmost counties. That is just going to be simply some gray and maybe some white shades that are some low but some non-zero tornado potential. Overall, these chances look a whole lot lower than they did as of yesterday, where we actually did have some flashes of green and some yellow over central Georgia. And this is continuing to show a slimmer confined area, just really our southernmost counties, maybe our southern two-most row of counties here in central Georgia as we go into the afternoon. So the risk for this continues to be a lot lower, a lot less confidence in seeing anything in the way of a potential brief spin-up tornado, but we will continue to keep you updated throughout this afternoon of anything that does pop up, whether it's a severe thunderstorm, whether it is one of those tornado warnings, or whether or not it's even anything at all. We could just see our fair share of strong thunderstorms that don't pop up into severe criteria. But it is going to be an active afternoon, a forecast that you definitely don't want to have any outdoor plans for. So once again, moving in to our westernmost counties around 2 to 3 o'clock in the afternoon. There's going to be a fine temperature gradient all across the state. What I really want to emphasize is not here in central Georgia, but take a look at this. 27 in Athens, 71 and 72 down in Albany and Valdosta. That is a temperature spread of, say, 27 to 72. If my math is correct, I believe that is a 45-degree temperature difference. Feeling like two different seasons here in the state of Georgia throughout this afternoon. So that warmer, more humid air mass does try to surge up, and it is going to be a half and half forecast. If you live really in areas in northern central Georgia, you're still going to hold on to that wedge with some high temperatures in the upper 30s, maybe the low 40s this afternoon. As you continue to progress down to the south, you'll start to see some 50s, eventually some 60s, and our southernmost counties could possibly see some high temperatures right there around the 70-degree mark. So quite the difference. If you have the potential to see some high temperatures in the 60s and the 70s later on today, that's a more conducive environment for some potentially strong to maybe even severe weather. You won't have those chances in areas that are a whole lot colder up to the north and the northeast. Then as we go into the overnight and early morning hours tomorrow, when you factor in the winds, that's what the feels like temperature is factoring in, we have the potential to drop into the mid to the upper teens tomorrow morning for feels like temperatures. As if that wasn't bad enough already, your feels like numbers as we go into the afternoon. Not going to get above freezing temperature. Maybe over to the east and the southeast, you have the potential to, but it's going to be blistering cold. So the heavy-duty puffer coat, that is going to get some good use as we go into your Monday morning. And along with that, Tuesday morning actually going to be the coldest of the two, where we have the potential to see some of these single-digit feels-like temperatures drip down into central Georgia. It feels like 3 degrees in Atlanta on Tuesday morning, 5 degrees up in Athens. Some of that air mass may creep into our north and northwesternmost counties, Upson, Lamar, Monroe, Jasper counties. So you guys have the potential to see some single-digit values as you walk out the door on Tuesday morning. Tuesday afternoon feels a little bit better than Monday afternoon, but still somewhere in the mid-30s. And then we go back overnight into early morning on Wednesday. Feels like numbers are down into the low 20s. It's going to be frigid after we get this system to move out of the picture. So this afternoon going to be the only window that you could feel some slightly warm temperatures. Try to soak them in before that rain does begin to move in or those thunderstorms. But overall, we are settling into a very, very cold stretch of weather into the beginning of the work week. So that's going to be phase 3. And we have a cold weather advisory outlined for northwestern central Georgia, really areas to the west and the northwest. 4 a.m. to 8 a.m. on Monday, just highlighting the potential for wind chills from 0 to 15 degrees. I think we're going to be closer to this 15-degree mark as opposed to the 0-degree mark, which areas of northwestern Georgia may experience. But not to take away from the fact that these areas not included in the cold weather advisory, it's still going to be downright cold as you walk out the door tomorrow morning. So this is a bit misleading, but I did want to inform you about that cold weather advisory for any of you that may be walking out the door as of tomorrow morning, see that alert pop up on your phone and say Taylor County, Crawford County, Bibb County. That's what that's going to mean. You just might have the threshold to be a little bit colder than areas over to the east and the southeast, but everyone is going to have a forecast that you need to layer up substantially for tomorrow morning. So the takeaways from your weekend weather as of this morning, now still going into the afternoon, so I'll update that to say Sunday afternoon, but nonetheless they remain the same. The window for a wintry mix is closing as of this morning. So basically the window for that wintry mix is completely gone. Only impacts that we have seen have been north of central Georgia, very thankfully. Now many of you may say, well, you were saying north central Georgia had the potential. Macon northward had the potential to get up to maybe about 1/4 inch of ice. The key word was potential. That was going to be the upper end of impacts if we saw anything at all, and it is not a bad scenario whatsoever. Areas in North Georgia are going to have some drastic impacts that linger for a couple of days courtesy of this system, and that's going to have some implications in the way of power outages, people not going into work, not going into school, which may sound like a good thing, but we can continue about our normal schedule as we go into tomorrow here in central Georgia. So just be on the lookout for maybe some slick spots as we walk out the door tomorrow, because those wet surfaces from some thunderstorms this afternoon and evening could freeze over as we go into the morning hours, and we are forecasting some sub-freezing temperatures to walk out the door to tomorrow morning, and along with that some very breezy conditions. But the quick warm-up will happen over the next couple of hours, especially farther down to the south and the southwest. So while areas like Dublin, Cochran, down to Hawkinsville, maybe down to Dooley County, Unadilla, Byronville, getting down to Vienna, Cordele, you guys had nothing in the way of winter weather. We were not forecasting that for you over the course of this week. However, what we are forecasting is going to be the risk for some severe weather in the way of a possible strong to maybe even severe thunderstorm. So that window moving into our west and northwesternmost counties starting around 2 p.m., more than likely moving out closer to around 6 p.m., but 7 p.m. just to be safe rather than sorry. So it's going to be that afternoon, that window that you do want to stay indoors. And again, that main line, that initial line with the heaviest impacts and the severe weather potential will be moving in from northwest to southeast. So areas down to the southeast, if you live in Dublin, you live in Wheeler County, you live down in Treutlen County, you guys are going to see the impacts a little bit closer to the 5, 6, 7 p.m. window as opposed to the 2 p.m. window. So those are the main takeaways as of right now, and that is why we continue our weather impact alert. It is just a very complicated and a very complex forecast where a lot of different features are coming into play, and we really appreciate you for staying up to date each and every day with the latest forecast as we've continued to fine-tune those details, but the winter weather risk has come to a conclusion. We'll have those patchy areas of still maybe something trying to be of the frozen nature for the next hour or two, but it's not going to have any impacts. Then we will transition into the thunderstorm risk this afternoon, and we'll start to talk about some slick areas that you could see on the roads as you're walking out the door tomorrow morning. Again, we will be coordinating with EMA directors. We'll be looking at the GDOT website for any icy patches that are causing traffic alerts, and you can stay updated with all of it throughout 13 WMAZ morning tomorrow from 5 to 7 on air and from 7 to 9 on 13 WMAZ Plus. Then after that, get used to every day having a high temperature in the 40s. If we have any windy conditions, those numbers are going to feel even colder. And it is the same story with your morning low temperatures, well below average in the upper teens and the low 20s as we head into the weekend. But at least it will be a quiet week. We're not looking at any precipitation chances. You might see some long-range models that are trying to say, we're going to do the winter weather dance for a third straight weekend going into Friday and Saturday. We don't have much confidence in that whatsoever, hence why we haven't put a rain chance on Friday or Saturday or anything of the frozen nature. So don't go believing someone that's going to post one of those doomsday model runs on social media like we have seen as of recent weeks. We are not looking at winter weather potential as of this very moment for this weekend, so there's nothing you need to worry about for this weekend. If that changes, we will come back and we will be the first to let you know. But right now, there's no sense in believing what one individual model run may say and what it may be calling for. And obviously, if you go believing that, then all your forecasts are going to be wrong. So the main thing you need to look out for is the rest of today going to be an active afternoon in the way of some potentially strong to severe storms, the refreezing of any wet surfaces as we go into tomorrow morning. And then if any standing bodies of water are somehow left after Monday afternoon, where we will have some sunshine and some temperatures that are above freezing, although they won't feel above freezing, we could see those wet surfaces freeze over once again as we go into Tuesday morning. But overall, we're not expecting any impacts in the way of this weekend weather system past tomorrow morning. That weather impact alert will finally come to a conclusion as of the midday hour on Monday. And we'll continue to keep you updated on a very blistering cold forecast day by day throughout the rest of the work week. But go ahead and prep the winter jacket because you are going to need it all throughout this last full work week of the month of January. So we'll be back here at the noon hour. We'll have another live update with the forecast. I'll be going over any changes, and I will continue to provide updates through the 1 p.m. hour. Then Ben Jones and David Guerrero are going to be in providing you with updates about our afternoon potential severe weather. But right now, just make plans to stay inside throughout the afternoon hours and for tomorrow morning. Make sure that you're tuning in for the latest update on any areas that are a little bit slick in nature and some possible traffic implications that we may or may not have as you hit the roads tomorrow morning. So thanks for tuning in. We'll be back here at the noon hour to provide you with some more updates.